Welcome to Angel Heart Radio. I'm Annette McCoy, and with me today is Janet Hickox, our wonderful astrologer who delights in telling us what we might be able to expect in our coming days and weeks, etc., etc. Janet, hello, hello, hello.
Hello, Annette. It's good to see you.
Always great to see you. And may I invite our audience, wherever you might be, why don't you hop on over to Angel Heart Radio Facebook page, because that's where you are going to find us when I get up what I need to get up. How interesting. You will find us on Angel Heart Radio Facebook page, and that's where you can share with us, ask Janet questions, and give your thoughts on what you think might be happening for you. You know, do you follow astrology? Do you use astrology to help you with your daily life? Because that's what Janet's here to help us with.
Yay! Of course, I use astrology for my life. It's usually hitting me over the head after something has happened, or after I have, some experience, and then I'm like, oh yeah, duh, Saturn and Pluto are opposing my ascendant.
Yes. And that explains why you're going through what you're going through.
Yeah. Which is to say, it would be much better for all of us if we knew sort of ahead of time. But the thing about astrology is it gives us a template, right? A thing, like a little clue as to what it is that we might be experiencing, but it's never a one-on-one connotation. So like every time Saturn is opposing your moon, let's say, it's not going to be the same thing, because we all have free will and we can all make different choices. And if something that normally would have made me more depressed than usual because of Saturn opposing the moon happens, and I get sad or depressed or melancholic over it, and the next time that Saturn is opposing the moon, I don't, it's because I chose not to, or the same circumstances didn't happen in the same way. So it's always just kind of one of those like jokes on us that we can see it much clearer from behind the mirror than we can looking ahead. But that doesn't mean that looking ahead isn't a good thing, because then we can kind of get a feel for, well, what are the energies going to be like? What might be in the cards, so to speak, for our experiences.
Indeed. Well, I'm looking forward to what you have to say today. We have Gabby Forrester with us. Lovely to see you here, Gabby. And Barbara from Long Beach in California.
I know who Barbara is.
And Carol from the other side of Melbourne. So welcome, welcome, welcome. And to those who might be watching without letting us know, thank you for joining us too. So, Janet, April astrologically, I do believe, is it right to say that there's an eclipse in there somewhere?
Oh, yeah. There is a new moon solar eclipse at the very end of the month. We have already had a couple of big things happen so far this month. One, the new moon on April 1st, and then which would have been April 1st for you all. It was actually March 31st for us on the west coast of the US. Venus moving into Pisces. We now are waiting for the next big thing, which is Jupiter and Neptune coming into a conjunction in Pisces. And as well, we also have this whole month, the Earth moving in our human designs in a way that triggers our shadows or our fears. So we actually have a lot to talk about today. And we could go in many different directions, because I think April's going to be an awesome month. So far, so good, right? It's today's the 6th, 7th in your part of the world. In the first week of the month, it's been pretty cool, pretty awesome. But there can, there can be 100 different ways, a million, 7 billion different ways that people can experience these astrological transits. The best we can do is give you the information, and then you can be aware and then watch out for some of the pitfalls if there are any, but also being aware of what are the awesome things that can happen with these transits.
Mm-hmm.
Do we have a question already?
No, but I'd like to welcome Julie Kiss, rather, and Sheila. And Sheila's, I'm getting lost here, in Los Angeles. So we've got people joining us from all over, which is really wonderful. Because, of course, you're up in Washington State.
Right.
Same time zone, very different part of the country.
Very different part of the country, but you're right, same time zone. And it's great to have people. It's so great that we can have this sort of technological advancement work for us, right? Instead of against us, to be able to be with one another across, I don't know how many thousands of miles we are from one another, Annette.
It's a long way.
Yeah, a long way, and different time. I mean, we're time traveling here, right? I've traveled into the future, and you're having to travel a bit into the past.
Yes.
You're in my yesterday. Wait a minute. I'm
right.
in your yesterday.
Yes, you're in my yesterday. Yeah, I'm in your tomorrow. I like that.
Right. It boggles the mind, the things that we could do, right? Time traveling. We thought we weren't time travelers, and here we are, time traveling.
Yes.
Yeah. All in one planet.
I like the way that we can say awesome April. Yeah, it's just got a ring about it. And there is something about this April for some reason.
There is. To me, it started actually in March. Actually, it started back in February when all of the planets turned into a forward motion. So it was almost like a green go sign, right? You know how stoplights have the red, I don't know what, we have red, gold, and
that's right,
red, yellow, and green. Green for go, right? And I was talking about it this morning as if you're on a road and all ahead of you, you see are green lights, right? You know, sometimes we see green, red, or all red, but this would be like all green lights. And we have that all green lights sort of energy with us through the whole of this month until we get to the 29th of this month, your 30th, when Pluto turns retrograde. So it'll be the first planet in the archetypal energies to actually move into that backward motion, where you know, right now everything is like, let's go, let's do. And to add to that, we've had a significant amount of energy to put toward using our creativity and our imagination, our fantasy capabilities to start to bring the fantasy into reality. And that hasn't ended, right? That's still with us. And the things that we've imagined that we dare to take steps on and actually work toward bringing into reality are the things that we get rewarded with, right? We get rewarded when we actually take action. And even if it turns out it doesn't work out, the thing is, once we take action on something, it opens the pathway to continued action, right? Oh, well, that didn't work, so let's try it a different way. Where if we sit back and do nothing, then this entire time has been a waste of precious momentum. And we want that momentum because, you know, the next several months after this are going to be with lots of different retrograde periods, whether it's, you know, it'll be Pluto, then Saturn, and then Mercury, and then Jupiter, and then Mars later in the year. And then all those planets will change back. And you know, that when we have that kind of motion where we're going forward, then we're going backwards, it can be a little chaotic. It can be a little, you know, disruptive, as opposed to the time period that we're in where everything is just go, do. And that's for everybody. Even if you have a retrograde planet in your natal chart, this time period is still about doing something, taking action. And even little steps, little baby steps are still okay, right? Even if you just walked to the door and opened it, that's still a step forward. So we still have some more time. So almost all of April, we are in that energy. And that means that even when we have things, that are changing, like Venus moving out of Aquarius and into Pisces, and then it's going to be Mars moving out of Aquarius and into Pisces, we still have momentum with us. So we just carry the momentum into the next expression.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. So let's start by talking, if we're going to talk about April, let's start with what started at the beginning, right? The very beginning of the month, we had a new moon. It was a beautiful new moon on April Fool's Day for most of the USA. And most of the world experienced it on that day. For some of us, we experienced it. I have to go back to March 31st on my calendar because it happened for me on the 31st. And that particular new moon was conjunct Mercury. And that means that we had messages coming in that of intention, of new beginnings, of an initiating energy that was designed to propel us into the future or into some kind of motion. That was followed the very next day by Mercury conjunct the sun. And that was also telling us that we were at the halfway point in the Mercury sun cycle. But it's almost like every time Mercury comes into a conjunction with the sun, one or the other of them is depositing information into the other one. So Mercury, being the messenger, is usually the one picking up the message from the sun and then carrying it forward. And that means that, new ideas were being seeded, new opportunities perhaps coming up. The idea here meaning that if we are in alignment with intention, then we are quickly gathering to us or attracting to us the things that we need in order to get done what we wanted to get done. That's
Right.
pretty profound. But it's also going to tell you that if you were focused on things that you didn't want, the same reaction is happening, right? The same attractive power happens whether you are focused on what you want or whether you're focused on what you don't want. It doesn't matter. It comes. So that's how we started.
It does matter, because if we're focused on what we don't want, we're going to get that. We don't want that. So that's the warning, or that's what you're alerting us to.
Well, yes, I mean, in that respect, it matters. But that's what I'm saying is the universe doesn't hear the I don't want. It just says, it just hears this or senses, I don't even know how to put the word, but senses what you're focused on. And if you're focused on what you don't want, well, it doesn't hear that it's, I don't want that. It just says, oh, you're putting a lot of energy and time and focus into this, and I'm going to attract that to you. Yay. So again, it's up to us to set intentions for the things that we want and align with that, with our heart, our minds, and our emotions, so that we are creating the path that we want. And right now, that's very powerful. And just a couple of days after that, Mars came into a conjunction with Saturn. So Mars and Saturn coming together creates a bit of it puts discipline to Mars's actions. So Mars can be impulsive. If it doesn't have a Saturn, Mars can be pretty impulsive, especially when it's in a sign like Aquarius that has a lot of inventive and innovative energy and potential in it. It can just like poof, go out into, several different directions. But the fact that Saturn was there gave Mars some discipline, meaning giving us all access to the discipline to, set goals and to take the steps that we need to follow the goals. The very next day after that, Venus changed signs. Now, remember, I think we talked about this last month. Last month was what, March? Yeah. And we probably talked about it in February too, that Venus and Mars were very close together. They've been, in lockstep for about 6 to 8 weeks now. And that's unheard of. They usually spend about 10 days together, close enough to can be considered a conjunction. And that usually happens every year to year and a half. But for whatever reason, this time, Venus's retrograde coincided with Mars moving into the sign. And so they ended up being together for a far longer period of time. So it's given us all access to a lot of creative energy, a lot of ability to, see, sense, intuit something, see the picture, create it in the real world. So we've been, I'm sure, very creative in our personal lives. And creativity isn't just about artistry or whether you can draw, sing, or dance. It's about how you are able to imagine something and then bring it into reality. That's, imagination is when it gets all up here in the head or just in the uncreated world. And then what we had the power to do is bring it in, right? The discipline and the organization to be able to do that. Now Venus has moved into Pisces and she's going to join up with Jupiter and Neptune. And actually the three of those planets together, they're pretty benefic together, meaning, they come together in a way that is pretty beautiful, if you will, in that it can be the energy of unconditional love. It can bring together. It can bring together people from diverse ideologies and maybe, like, I keep thinking about maybe Russia and Ukraine. Could they solve their problem, whatever that might be?
Fabulous. Yes.
Yeah, without continuing to kill one another or, tear up the land and tear up crops and what have you. I don't know that it will apply in that situation, but the potential is there. And especially if we can get beyond our very human understanding of how things work and our human fears and shadow projections and things like that. Because the high side of all of this is to be able to see things from that higher perspective, from the point of view of spirit or God or source or goddess, whatever you want to call it, right? So if we can tap into that, and we all have the ability to do that this month, we've had that ability for a while, to really affect change in our families, in our communities, in our countries, in the world itself, because we're thinking and behaving from a higher point of view. Does that make sense? Like from higher self instead of human self.
Mm-hmm.
Even though we're still humans, it's not like we, became something different overnight, but it does give us that access that we haven't had. And so Venus, Jupiter, and Neptune all in the same sign give us that higher access to compassion, to tolerance and acceptance, and that unconditional love, to faith, trust, surrender in a higher power. And that's something we've desperately needed. And here we have it. We just need to reach out and use it in our lives, in the world. So, and then Mars moves into Pisces. I'm not sure if his addition to Pisces is going to be a good thing. I think it might be, because I think what Mars does when he gets into Pisces is he brings in the action piece to spirituality, right? So no longer just, paying lip service to a higher spirituality, but actually doing something with it. So if I could pick a day where I think possibly there could be some forward movement in solving some of the biggest world problems that we have, it would be maybe after the 14th of this month, when Mars actually makes his way into Pisces. So we'll have about 3 or 4 weeks of his transit through Pisces. And of course, then he'll meet up with Jupiter and he'll meet up with Neptune. He won't quite meet up with Venus again, because Venus will move faster and out of the sign faster. If I were to have you circle a day on your calendar, I would circle April 12th. In fact, on my calendar, it's highlighted. I can show you, right? I'm not even making this up. I highlighted it. Oh, I can't, because I have this screen thing on, but it's highlighted. Trust me when I say. And I highlighted it because that is the day that Jupiter comes into the exact conjunction with Neptune. And that same day, the sun comes into a sextile with Saturn. So those are benefic configurations, right? The sun is our ego and the outer personal self. And of course, Saturn is the, the taciturn father, stern authority figure. When they come together, they usually are, working well to bring things into being. And then Jupiter and Neptune coming together. We've been watching this for a very long time. We knew this was happening. Way back last year, even we started talking about the fact that on that day, Jupiter and Neptune would come together in Pisces, a sign they co-rule. So in astrology, rulership means an empowered planet. So when a planet is in a sign that it has rulership over, it is much more empowered to bring about the energies, the higher force energies of that sign. So we have the sign of Pisces, which is spiritual, creative, imaginative, intuitive, very highly mystical, being able to tap into the magical. And then the two co-rulers of Pisces are Jupiter and Neptune. Well, Neptune has been there for quite the while and will continue to stay there for a while. But now Jupiter, the more traditional ruler of Pisces, is there. So now we're banding together with expansion and with the concept of having faith, right? Faith that everything is working exactly the way it should, exactly how it was designed to, along with Neptune's spirituality and mystical qualities, unconditional love qualities. And those two are coming together on the 12th. But I say today, when I checked, they're less than a degree apart from one another. So they're already in what we could consider an applying conjunction. And what I mean by that is that they're coming together. So Jupiter, being the faster moving planet, is moving toward Neptune. Then on the 12th, they will conjunct. And then Jupiter, being the faster body, will pass Neptune and move on. But that whole period of time, I'm going to say from today all the way through maybe the 16th or 17th of this month, we're still going to be in the blush of that Jupiter and Neptune conjunction. And, the only limiting factor to that is what we can imagine. I remember the song by John Lennon about Imagine, right? The song Imagine. This is like he had to have had Jupiter and Neptune very tight in his own chart because he tapped into exactly what happens when we can use our imagination for the positive, right? Like nothing happens in this world, nothing gets created in this world without imagination, right? We have to, it's something that an idea or an inspiration generates for us. And then we take an action toward that creation. And then voila, it's there, right? We didn't go to the moon just because we said one day, oh, hey, let's go to the moon. It started in somebody's imagination where they could picture rocket ships going to the moon, or in some way that, humans could get to that very, big thing that we see in the night sky. And that imagination then lends itself to the creative forces, and then it happens, right? So this is huge. What do we want to create in the world right now? If we wanted to create peace, we could do that. We could do it easily, right? Just by focusing on peace, not focusing on the atrocities of the war or the ugliness of it. That's not to say that those things aren't happening, but it says, okay, but I'm looking at this for my world, right? That what I want to see is the beauty, the peace, the harmony,
Okay, now Jacqueline has joined us.
Hi, Jacqueline.
And Janet, I have a question for you. The 12th seems to be a really important day. If that's somebody's birthday, does that make it even more special, or?
It means that the actual conjunction shows up in their chart and will be in effect for them for the entire year.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So anybody whose birthday is right around that day, where that even, even if your birthday's today or sometime between now and the 12th, you're still going to be contending with that conjunction for the entire year. So the themes that are playing out in your life around tolerance, acceptance, love, creativity, imagination, spirituality, mysticism, magic, deception. If we're at the ugly end of it, it's deceit and deception or betrayal. All those themes are going to play out for the entire year. So that's how the solar return charts for people work, right? There's a theme that gets set up and it comes, it takes precedence throughout the year for you. So if your birthday's coming up soon, or even if it's just a day or so, even afterwards, it's going to show up as a signature in your chart for the foreseeable future. That was a good question. Yeah. It's like when I looked at, I wasn't really looking completely. My birthday's not until June, but I was like, let me just think about this. Mercury is out of the shadow zone the day before my birthday. So I don't even have a Mercury retrograde to contend with this year. Yay.
Yay.
So just it's always a good thing to know that, you don't have to, worry about that. It has its own brand of problems, but when we have a planetary transit that's occurring, it does affect that person, and not intensely. It's not that it's any worse or any harder or any easier for you throughout the year, but the theme that starts right around your birthday is going to play out for a longer period of time.
Right.
Yeah. So are there any questions that people have out there about Jupiter, about Neptune, about what they mean coming together, about what they mean separately? Because, maybe we have to talk about what is Jupiter and what is Neptune separately.
Well, you're throwing it open. So those who are on Ancient Heart Radio Facebook page, feel free to ask your questions.
Yeah. In the meantime, I want to kind of switch a little bit to human design if I can. Absolutely. Because Neptune and Jupiter coming together at 23 degrees of Pisces, by the way, means that both of them will be together at the gate 36 in our human design. And the gate 36 is on the solar plexus. So it means that there's a shift happening with our emotional body. So the solar plexus is the emotions, the seat of the emotions in our human design. And it is the center that Annette and I talked about. I think it was this time last year, actually, or maybe, gosh, could it even have been longer than that, where we talked about an evolutionary leap or change that's occurring in and around the solar plexus in 2026 or 2026. Oh my gosh, that's only 4 years from now. Wow. So 2026 or 2027. Now my mind has gone blank. But either way you look at it, that's coming, and it's coming quick. And the high side of that change that's coming is that we become more aware of how to use our emotions in the correct way. So I'm going to wax weird for a minute. Sometimes I just got to do that. I've been reading a lot of different books around galactic astrology, and galactic astrology takes us back to the roots of our humanity on this planet, but how we were seeded from other planetary systems. So in the beginning, right, there's this energy of groups of entities that are exploring polarity or duality. One group of those explorers was service to self. So they believed in domination or in control, and that whatever I wanted is what goes, and so became very self-centered, overly self-centered. or selfish, you could even say.
Mhm.
And the other group was very much about service to others, right? Service to the whole or to the community. And both groups ended up deciding that emotions were the problem, right? That if you had emotional energy, that you couldn't be completely in service to the self or in service to others. So the problem with that is that the emotions become sort of the calibrating energy. And so a new experiment was born here on planet Earth where humans would have the choice to be in the service to self realm or the service to humanity realm or service to the whole, but they would have to do it with emotions. So emotions came to Earth, right? Or we're pretty much born here on this planet. And
Mhm.
what's happened for us is this is a fairly recent, dare I say, addition to the planet or to life forms. And we've done a pretty poor job so far of understanding how to use emotional energy. So, but we're creatures that are evolving, or we are always in an evolutionary state. So I'm not going to say that was wrong or we were bad or whatever. It would be like, blaming a baby for not knowing how to walk from the day they're born, right? We suddenly had emotional energy and we had to learn how to use it. And now what's happening is we're becoming more aware of how to use emotional energy in service to not only ourselves, but to the whole, right? So now, instead of always being in reactive energy or reaction to stimulus from outside of us that triggers an emotion, we're learning how to become responsive. You've heard me talk about this, Annette. This has been a subject you and I've talked about a lot throughout the last couple of years, because the whole idea is that part of our evolution is about becoming much more emotionally evolved. I call it EQ, emotional quotient, like IQ was our mental quotient or our
Mhm.
intellectual quotient. How smart were we, or how much intelligence did we have? Now it's about how much more emotional intelligence do we have. And that's the key. And the key lies in responding to what shows up in our world instead of reacting. So it looks like instead of, some kind of stimulus outside of us provoking us to throw a screaming tantrum, instead we breathe for a moment, and allow ourselves to choose how we are going to respond to whatever that stimulus was. And that's a process that we've been in. Well, Jupiter and Neptune are coming together at the gate 36 on the solar plexus, which is called the gate of expansion, or sorry, it's the gate of the spirit of exploration, or the spirit of experience, the voice of experience. So it has a tendency to show up in the lower energy wave. It shows up sort of as boredom, or boredom that leads us to restlessness, or the restlessness that comes up because we don't know what to do, right? We're kind of stuck. We might feel stuck, or we might feel like we're in a rut. And rather than responding in a way that makes sense, we just like dump what we're doing and go in a different direction, right? We throw out the baby with the bathwater. That's another way we can say that. And so part of the lesson with Jupiter and Neptune is to choose. What do we want to choose? And one of
Mhm.
the big questions that it starts with is, well, what do you want? What are you trying to create? And there can be crisis or turbulence in this energy. So them coming together at this particular gate doesn't mean that everything's easy peasy out there. I mean, if we just look at Asia, Europe right now, we see the crisis and how that's impacting all of the countries on the planet, or soon will be affecting everybody as this goes on. So we can see, that the outer world is still showing us the stimulus. It's what we do with that stimulus that counts, right? So, yes, it's not pretty, but we don't need to react to that, right? We can be responsive to that, which helps us to raise our consciousness level on every person on the planet, and then causes us to push the limits of our human capacity to love, or to be in spirit, or to be tolerant, to be accepting, and to get out of victim energy, because part of the lower frequency of this could be considered victimy, the victim. Oh, woe is me, right? Or the martyr. I guess the martyr comes up with that. And one of the other things we learn with the emotional center is that things happen in the right timing. And timing is not in human hands. Timing is in the hands of source or
I
God,
hear
right?
you.
And
Absolutely. And we can get lost in that, can't we? We can go, oh,
right.
I want this today. And yet then when something happens, it is in perfect time when we look at it in retrospect. And
Yeah.
that's so important. I had a friend recently who couldn't go on a trip, and she was going, oh, maybe. And then we discussed it, and we both said, oh, well, you'll go if it's meant to be. And sure enough, the trip was postponed, and yes, it's in perfect timing, and she can do a little extra tour that she wanted to do, but the first timing didn't allow her to do that. And she said, oh, this is incredible. Well, the more we trust the universe or God or whatever we would like to call that.
Superpower.
Yes, thank you. It is amazing, and it happens. There are stories. Maybe our audience would like to share a story where they have felt that they've come up against a brick wall, and yet it was a brick wall protecting them and showing them to go or to hold on, or to maybe go in a different direction.
Yeah. I think the best part of all of that, Annette, is that it takes the stress out of living. Right? If you can just relax and say, oh, I can't see why this is happening in this way at this time, but I have to trust that this is working out. All I have to do is stay aligned with my intention, whatever that was, right? To take a trip, or to, build a business, or to whatever you fill in the blank. And it's my job to stay aligned with that and wait for the universe to show me the right timing. And when we do that, then we are creating with calibration with our emotions and not against it. So we're not fighting, we're not, in the end, war or fighting is, it's a part of our human design. It's been a part of our experience, but it's been when we are out of alignment with our emotional self, right? When we are in fear, even over something. And that's another theme that pops up this April in a pretty big way. Actually, it started last month. So you guys have already been experiencing
You're talking about fear.
We're talking about fear. Fear as a shadow, as a paralysis point. So, fear is always, we have the acronym, the FEAR, false evidence appearing real. And in human design, we see that coming from the spleen center. So if you are all out there looking at your human design chart, if you're looking at it, the lower right, or excuse me, that would be left, the lower left side of the chart has a triangle that's pointing inward toward the center part of the chart. If it's brown, it's defined in your chart, or gold, it depends on your printer. And if it's white, you have an open spleen. It's called the spleen center. It is not anatomically correct. I know that. It's just a center that is all about survival. And survival, fear even, not false evidence appearing real, but fear and the responses to fear, the fight, flight, or freeze, those responses that have been a part of our human experience on the planet have kept us alive, right? It kept our species alive and well. And we've adapted to many different weather situations, or, even on a seasonal basis, the different things that we have to adapt to. And we've done that, right? So initially, at least, having the spleen and the center for fear and those responses, those automatic responses, served us well. But as we've evolved, as we've become more civilized, if you want to use those terms, um, our need for the fight, flight, or freeze responses has dwindled. Yet it's still there, and we still find them triggered. But now they get triggered frequently with false evidence appearing real.
Mm.
And at this time of the year, the Earth is passing through the gates of the spleen center and challenging us basically to release fear, or to release the shadow, or release blocks, or even in a real way, kind of release the paralysis that we have had as a part of our life, whatever it is that we've used to stop us from moving forward, whether it was a fear of being inadequate, a fear of not knowing enough, a fear of the past, a fear of the future, fear of failure, of not being perfect, of nothing having meaning, all these different fears we've used as a way to paralyze ourselves from taking action. And this is a month where all of those are coming up. It actually began the third week of March. So we've already been through a couple of these different iterations, different types of fear energies. And we have the rest of April and the first week of May to finish the Earth's transits. And this is sort of what happens to us also in September, late September, all of October, and first week in November, when it's the sun going through all of those different gates of the spleen. I think when the Earth goes through those gates, though, it triggers something deeper within us, right? It maybe even hurts a little bit more because we can see how we've held ourselves back, or how fear has played a big role. So as we go through this particular month, all of those different fears can be triggered. And in this particular week, for example, it is the fear of the future, where the
Mhm.
gate 57 is what the Earth is transiting through. And it's the gate that is the most psychic, the most intuitive gate. It has clarity coming from instinct, intuition. We might call it gut instinct. And yet its fear is that something bad is going to happen in the future, right? That or that what I see coming in the future isn't true or isn't real. So we can stop ourselves because we're afraid of what might come to pass, or that what we want won't happen. So the 57 really dials us in to our intuition, which is also backed up by Jupiter and Neptune coming together in Pisces, right? And Venus in Pisces, and eventually Mars in Pisces. And last month with the Sun in Pisces, reminding us that we are intuitive beings, that we have body wisdom that surpasses the mind, that we are always tapped into. We just have to remember that it's there and to validate its use in our lives, right? I always think of it as three ways of getting information. One way is logic, and that comes from the intellect. The other way is intuition, because it's coming from the spleen or the gut or the inner self. And then the third way is just plain knowingness, right? We don't know where we know, why we know what we know, we just know. Um,
Mhm.
but we've invalidated those two, the intuition and the knowingness, in favor of logic. And we can't do that with this week, right? That just won't work. We have to be able to engage at the level of intuition. As we move into next week, we end up in the fear of failure. So a lot of different things may trigger us about whether we're going to succeed in what we want to do, or whether we're about to, if we're about to take a new step forward, suddenly we may feel that fear of failure. Sometimes I think of it as the fear of success, even. I think there's a
Mhm.
good percentage of people out there afraid to succeed.
Oh,
So,
sure.
yeah.
Now,
And go ahead.
Janet, may I give some feedback from Jacqueline,
Sure.
who is finding this very interesting because she's never really thought of it this way. Having her birthday on the 23rd of April
Mm-hmm.
in this year, I feel as if there is something is about to happen. I just never knew what. Now hearing this explanation makes me understand it so much better.
Right. And what's really interesting is that the Earth is at the gate 28 during her birthday. So J-Lo, your birthday on the 23rd means that the Earth was in the gate 28 when you were born. And the 28 is a sort of interesting fear because it's the fear that everything is meaningless, that there's no meaning, there's no purpose. In the Gene Keys, we call it purposelessness. That just is a hard word to get to roll off your tongue, purposelessness. While in the gift or the highest expression, it becomes totality where we're just all in, right? We're all in with whatever it is that's happening. Life becomes more of an adventure. There's the challenge of finding purpose and living out our purpose. So that is a theme that's likely been played out because the Earth now on your birthday is coming back to that same point, and it brings it home, right? It elevates it maybe even to the next level of in our spiral of consciousness, right? As we're learning and evolving, it keeps bringing you to the point where you are finding more and more meaning, creating meaning by being in the adventure of life, being in the adventure, loving, living, breathing, acting, skydiving. This is sort of the the daredevil kind of setup, but not that I'm saying that she's a daredevil, but at some point, sometimes that feeling of meaninglessness can kind of push people into doing things that are of kind of a daredevil sort of way just to feel something, even if it's to feel the rush, of driving your motorcycle 100 miles an hour with no helmet on. That kind of experience can be sort of negative, but the fear is that if I don't do that, there's no meaning to my life or purpose.
Jacqueline's giving us some more feedback, which is lovely. And we have a question from Jats, who wants to know, hi, Janet, can you
Hello.
please elaborate on the concept of new beginnings in April, please? Thank you.
So what do you want to start? And Jess, it comes back to what do you want? And that's a question that every one of us has to contend with because, a part of our human existence is determining what, we have free will, and our free will really is part of intention. And so what is your intention? So if your intention is to start a new relationship or start a new business or a new healthy body routine of some sort, this is the time, right? Because first of all, we have the beginning of the new astrological year with us. We haven't come to the full moon yet, so we're still in the energy of the new moon. Plus, April is just ripe with opportunities. And it's just our job to tell the universe what it is we want, and then follow the signposts along the way that will take you to where it is that you need to go to get it. So I know, that sounds, I know it does kind of sound vague, doesn't it? But new beginning is whatever you want it to be, whatever you want it to be. But you better be behind it 100%, or you're going to have mixed results in what you get. So if there's a gate in our human design, that's the gate of saying yes. Well, Jupiter and Neptune are kind of sitting at the gate of saying no, if you can believe that, right? So there is a gate that is up in our face right now where we may be shutting down things in our lives out of fear, perhaps, or out of a feeling of I don't deserve it, or a victim-y sort of feeling. Rather, we're meant to say yes, but yes to the right things. And the right things are in alignment with what you desire, what you want,
Mm.
which is going to be different from what I want, which is different from what Annette wants, or even your spouse or your kids or your, other family members or friends. So I hope that answers your question.
Now, Barbara has a ripper question.
Okay.
And I figure it might well be a topic for a show. I don't know that it's going to be a 2-minute answer. How do the different ways people show up in human design, such as manifestors, projectors, etc.,
Mhm.
best deal with this theme of fear? Are there some key things each different human design category needs to pay attention to?
Oh, yes, Barbara. Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Good question. So the very pat answer is that if you, no matter what type you are, follow your type and your strategy and your authority, and that's always going to keep guiding you back to the right lane for you. That's the easy answer. The hard part is, well, what is my type and my strategy and my authority? Do I remember that from my human design reading, or have I even had one yet where I've been able to discuss that? But once you know your type, your strategy, and authority, it is going to give you everything that you need to make the right decisions, right? So that's what it all comes down to, is making the right decisions for you, which is going to be different for you, different from me, different from Annette. But when you know that information, then it will steer you out of fear. But likely there are things, our DNA, our very DNA, the very part of who we are, the code for everything that is Janet, that is Annette, that is Jess, that is Barbara, has fear in it, right? Fear is a part of the DNA process. As we evolve, what we see is that we get to choose. Are we going to react to the fear, or do we respond? So, in a
Those
way,
two words.
yeah, react and respond, right? And if
Mm.
we are reacting, it's because fear or paralysis, the fight, flight, freeze has taken over, right? So your DNA is down to its, very ancient roots at that point. As we've evolved, we have now choice, right? Free will. And we always had free will. We just didn't know what to do with it. Well, now we know what to do with it, right? We
Mm.
choose how it is that we are going to show up. So I'm just going to give an example. If you're a manifester, actually, I think, Barbara, you are a generator, I think. So if you're a generator, you're a type that has a lot of life force energy, who has at her fingertips, even though it's not in your fingertips, a motor that responds very quickly to yes or no. Yes, I want that, or no, right? But it's a body response. It doesn't come from the mind. You might feel it almost like a tug toward something if it's yes, or a push away from it if it's a no. But somehow your body is responding, and usually responds with sound like or So you as a generator type, let's say, I'm assuming you're a generator, you have that, right? That already as a key. And you don't say yes to things that come up from within you, like ideas or inspiration, or I'm in meditation this morning and I get this brilliant idea and now I go out and take action on it. That is not what a generator does. A generator has to wait until there's something in the outer world that they can respond to. So this morning you have this great idea to start XYZ business. Well, you can't take any action on it yet because if there isn't anything in the outer world to respond to, it's not the right time. So there's the generator strategy, right? To wait for something in the outer world that maybe matches the picture of something that you've wanted within you. Then there's also the authority. And authority is sort of like an extra tool on your tool belt that helps you make that decision. Let's say you have a sacral authority. That just means that in the moment you have something to respond to. Your body goes through the process of saying yes or pushing away and saying, no, not for me, not now, not ever. Um, And listening to that is going to put you in the way of the right timing for the things that you want to do, or for staying clear of committing to things that aren't meaningful for you. If you have emotional authority, this one is more tricky because it has to get clarity over time. That means that it has to often check in with itself. Is this right for me? Does this feel good to me? Or mm-mm. And I have to check in with myself over time because emotions have wave formats, right? They have highs and they have lows, and we don't know where we are necessarily on that wave. So we have to wait for that clarity to come. And when that clarity comes, even then, we may still feel like we're a little bit unsure, but for the most part, everything was, this felt good. So then I could be reasonably certain that I am responding in the affirmative to whatever the opportunity might have been that showed up in my outer world. And then all the types have their own strategy, and they also possibly have an authority that's like the little extra tool that they can use. Hope that answers that question. It won't answer it if you're
Wonderful.
I didn't go through all the types, but you're right, Annette, that could be a show too, where we just talk about human design types, strategies, and authorities.
Good. I like it when we get
Ideas.
suggestions and ideas. Now, Jats has reminded me that through a question that we haven't mentioned your website, because Jats said, how does she find out what type she is in human design? And of course, if Jats or anybody else would like to visit your website, you very kindly do a free human design chart, which will give that answer. And your website is www.living-astrology.com.
There you have it. And not only do you get a free human design chart, but I also send a report, a 9 or 10 page report that gives you a little bit of an idea of what some of those things mean on your human design chart. So you'll be able to get that information. And if you want an astrology chart, there's also a form on the website for you to get that as well. So sometimes people want one or the other, but hey, if you're all in, get both. Why not?
Barbara's very grateful too for your answer to her question. I'm very grateful to Barbara because she's given us a wonderful idea for a show.
Yeah, exactly. So anyway, so I think the one thing we didn't really talk about was the eclipse coming up at the end of the month.
We mentioned it.
So this will be a solar eclipse, and a solar eclipse happens only at a new moon. So it is a jacked up new moon, essentially, right? It gives more punch behind the new beginning. So again, back to whoever's question that was about, new beginnings. Or an initiation into something new, starting something new. The end of the month, we have another, very empowered moon giving us that option to start something new. The only limitation to that is going to be the fact that Pluto will have already turned retrograde the day before. But Pluto's retrogrades are not as, I don't want to say they're not as important, because that's certainly not true. But they don't stop us from taking action like, say, a Mercury retrograde or a Mars retrograde might. A Pluto in retrograde at a time of new beginnings would have us consider the dark, the underbelly of something, as well as the light of something, and to maybe even consider what we might want to transform as a part of our process of beginning something new. And that particular solar eclipse is going to happen at 10 degrees of Taurus, which puts it very, very close to Uranus. And so we'll have, an opportunity for change, for surprises, for, some excitement with that new moon solar eclipse as well. So be prepared. It's good stuff. It's good.
Well, Janet, what a wonderful note to end on. Be prepared. The
Be
scouts.
prepared. Be prepared. Yeah. So anyway, it's for the most part, make it a good month, right? And you make it a good time by, it's not going to be all Pollyanna and, fairy dust, if only. But even if you're presented with a challenge, greet it with a response that is more considered as opposed to a reaction that is usually one of fear, fret, worry, anger, upset. So it's your choice how you show up. It's your choice because what you focus on is what you're creating.
Well, and you'll smile because your friend and mine, Londa, has said, I surrender on my knees.
That is not a bad thing either, right? Surrender is also a part of that Pisces experience, Jupiter and Neptune surrender, right? No one said you had to be Atlas and carry the weight of the world on your shoulders. So let go, surrender. If it's not your business, stay out of it, right? That could be a whole nother show. What's your business? What's somebody else's business? What's God's business?
And Jacqueline's agreeing with Londa. We need grace, giving ourselves more grace. So true.
So very true.
We need to be kind, don't we, to ourselves?
And and I looking ahead, just because I do that, looking at May, we also have unconditional love and the love of that, of spirit coming at us with Jupiter next month. So it's not like the good ends here, even though we go into retrograde seasons. We have some really good energy carrying us up through the summer. And we need to take advantage of that, right? We need to use it to its highest and best. We don't always have such powerful Jupiter energy in places where it can really bring us to the core of who we are, which is spiritual beings having a human experience, reminding us on a daily basis, right? That we can let go of some things.
Indeed.
Yeah.
And as I'm closing, Janet, I would like to remind everybody that these shows should never replace your legal, medical, nor professional advice, nor your own sound judgment. Thank you. Jacqueline says, April showers always bring May flowers.
Correct. Correct.
That's a nice little saying. Yeah. Thank you, Janet. It has been another wonderful show. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. And may I remind you, yes, to spread the kindness, spread the love, and remember to cover yourself in that as well. Indeed. Much love to everyone. May you go forth and feel the joy in your heart. Make sure you laugh every day.
Right.
And help others too as well. Bye for now.
Bye.